Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast. And Awesome Ward is my co-pilot once again this week. Awesome. Welcome once again to the Tim May Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, you know, the seat's always there. It's got your name on it. Occasionally there's a guest when your schedules conflict, but usually you're at the controls when I'm not. And I appreciate you being on once again. Awesome.
Yeah, just ready to get into it. As always, lots to discuss and never boring around here.
In other words, gear up, flaps up. Let's go into cruise. I'm with you. Real quickly, just jumping into it. We talk mostly about Ohio State football because that's mostly what we cover. Number one. Number two, that's mostly what we're experts about. And number three, Ohio State. When you talk about Ohio State football, you're talking about the national scene also, because Ohio State is part and parcel to the national scene. Well, new college football playoff rankings will be coming out on Tuesday. This podcast drops on Tuesday morning, so we don't have the new CFP rankings. But if you were a speculating man, Awesome Ward, what would be your speculation of where Ohio State lands after seeing Michigan State get beat over the weekend, which was previously number 3 in those CFP rankings? Where would you say Ohio State's going to land this time?
Well, and you can't take that just in a vacuum, and even just in the Big Ten. I mean, Alabama, frankly, continues to look well below its own standard and well below the national expectation for them as a threat to win it all, which the committee said they were the number 2 team in the country. Well, the number 2 team in the country probably shouldn't beat a hapless LSU team that's already fired its coach by 6 points at home. And if Ed Orgeron was even remotely competent, they would have won that game. Cincinnati, for the second week in a row, struggled. It's hard to see how that would elevate them over Ohio State, which, again, by the Ohio State standard, didn't play up to the way its full potential on Saturday at Nebraska, even if that's a more significant win than it might get credit for because of Nebraska's record. Oregon didn't really light the world on fire, but they still have the head-to-head. I don't know that this week is enough to change that order for the committee. I don't know what they'll do on Tuesday night, Tim, but I think Ohio State will be somewhere in the top 4 now, and it's hard to imagine why they wouldn't be.
Yeah, top 4 or 5. Like you said, it depends on the whims of the committee. It's hard to believe they won't be in the top 4 based on what we've seen thus far. But if we were trying to light a fire, last weekend was not the time to bring your kindling out because there were very few sparks floating around the country. I mean, it was crazy. Maybe it's because of parity of college football. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it was the November and teams are getting a little bit tight. But let's get specifically in. I agree with what you said about Alabama, by the way. I just don't, I understand their legacy. I understand their tradition. I understand their history. But this is not one of those great Alabama teams. I'll be proven wrong, I'm sure, at the end of the year. We'll see how it goes. But let's get right into what we were talking about earlier. And by the way, I have my special guest this week is a former Ohio State All-American running back. Was finally celebrated for being named a member of the College Football Hall of Fame in 2020. He finally got his day again in the shoe, the same place where he lost his shoe on that legendary run against Illinois way back in 1984 and that great comeback victory by Ohio State. But Keith Byars joins me this week for an extended interview, and we talk about a lot of things, including maybe that wasn't Ryan Day's best day of play calling this past week against Nebraska, but you can still see the talents that's there. The Ohio State running game maybe needs a little bit of a freshening, for want of another term, whether that could come from the quarterback maybe running a few more times. We'll get into that debate. You and I will too. But I just want to get your take coming out of that game at Nebraska. I saw that as the 2 real pothole games for this Ohio State team this year on the road. I said that back in August at Nebraska, where you've got a coach and a team fighting for their careers and their respectability. And then the next one is going to be at Michigan. We've got a coach fighting for respectability, even though that team may have 10 wins by the time Ohio State faces it. I'm talking about Michigan. But, it wasn't that of a surprise that Ohio State struggled once again a little bit in the red zone, but struggled once again to put up a lot of points based on the way Nebraska had played so far, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was another highly rated defense statistically. They had played very hard. They had a good scheme. And I think if you look at what this Nebraska team has done best, the most success they found is with that defense, which is not Scott Frost's forte. So you wonder if they'll be able to retain that, and how important that would be for Scott Frost's future if he is to get another year, which I don't really know how the results would merit that, even if they're playing very hard. But that's a conversation that a lot of people were debating in Lincoln over the last couple of days, and really for a month or more, but certainly while we were there in the press box on Saturday. I think when you look 1 through 85, Ohio State, I understand why they're a double-digit favorite. That was part of the reason why I picked them to win that game very comfortably. And just because, that should happen doesn't mean that it will in every single week. And there's something that's just out of sorts for Ohio State offensively.
Yep.
But they continue to string together enough drives where they can get Noah Ruggles in position to kick field goals. You don't really want to rely on a field goal kicker necessarily to win a national championship, but sometimes you have to on the way to get there. I think that Ohio State will get these things figured out on offense. The comparison of panic or confidence that Ohio State could get the defense fixed after week 2, I thought that was a little bit more up in the air. You look at the talent and the pedigree of the coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball and the talent they have to work with there, obviously, I think it seems like a much safer bet that the offense would get it figured out. And, in some ways, the fact that Ohio State has not played 3 complete phases and dominated in a while, maybe that's a good thing that their best football is still ahead of them. I don't know. That's maybe too much of a silver lining, but they didn't lose the game, and you take a 9-point win on the road every time. That sounds like a cliche, but again, as I say on this show all the time, cliches become that because they're true.
Hey, number one, thanks for calling this a show, man. That means it has some production quality. Some people might debate that. And then number 2, like I was saying after that Penn State game, man, every 2 field goals you kick, that's a touchdown, and Noah Ruggles has basically scored 4 touchdowns for Ohio State in the last 2 weeks. I mean, stays perfect kicking the ball both on PATs and FGs. Who knew he'd have more FGs than PATs, I think I could write a song about that, a country western song. But the bottom line is, you get it where you can get it. But without a doubt, there is concern about Ohio State red zone offense now, and basically the running game offense. And you and I are going to come back and kind of cut that up a little bit, and then talk about this upcoming game with Purdue, the spoiler makers. I think that's an apt nickname for these guys now. Maybe they ought to change it to that, to take out any kind of double entendre that, in fact, they're an alcoholic drink. But the bottom line is the Boilermakers have beaten Iowa. They've beaten Michigan State, knocked both of them out of the unbeaten ranks. Didn't do a lot of good for the Big Ten's Dauber, but for the Boilermakers, the Spoilermakers, it did a lot for that program. They're going to come in throwing the ball. We know that because that's pretty much all they do. But, let's get to my conversation with Keith Byars, ladies and gentlemen, former Ohio State All-American. And for like 8 or 9 games, his junior year at Ohio State, the greatest running back I've ever covered. He got a high ankle sprain late in that 1984 season, which kind of took away from him. Of course, he suffered a broken bone in his foot going into the 1985 season when he was heavily favored to win the Heisman Trophy. So things just didn't work out for him in the Heisman Trophy race. He has Doug Flutie to thank for that a little bit in 1984, but he always has some great observations. He watches every Ohio State game. He's a big Ohio State fan, as he alludes to in this conversation. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Keith Byars. And as promised, ladies and gentlemen, a blast from the past. Basically, one of the places I covered at Ohio State. I don't know, Keith Byars, you might have been the greatest player I ever covered at Ohio State, but Orlando Pace, some of these other guys might have a little bit of a argument there. But man, welcome back to the Tim May podcast.
Well, thank you, Tim. But I appreciate the compliment. But one thing about that compliment, I don't think nobody has that mental at Ohio State, and that's the greatness of Ohio State. I said, well, that's a little disrespectful to a lot of great players that played before me and those that came after me. As long as one of us or a few of us have mentioned, that's good enough.
Yeah.
And that because it's always going to be somebody coming along and you're happy that the foundation was laid before, you got there. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people, came to Ohio State, because of what you're signing up for. It's a lifetime commitment. And as long as you're one of the greats, that's awesome.
Well, all I know is you were the last great to take a bow in Ohio Stadium last home game against Penn State. They recognized you for being part of that 2020 College Football Hall of Fame class. Long time coming. It was belated, of course, because of the pandemic from a year ago and stuff like that. But, dude, what was it like to hear an ovation once again in the shoe, man? That had to be pretty good.
Oh, it was. It was. I mean, it took me back, 35, almost 40 years ago. And, when you're there as a student athlete, playing at Ohio Stadium, you don't take it for granted because it's special, because it's something a lot of people, for me especially, a childhood dream to wear the scarlet and gray and play at Ohio State University. Yeah. So, those 4 years that I was there, each time was special. I remember offensive line coach, rest in peace, Coach Bill Miles. He used to stand at the gate at the Horseshoe every time we walked on the field, whether it was for picture day, whether we had a practice or a game day. You always ran on the football field because it's like hallowed ground. You're in the shoe. This is a special place. So every football Saturday, I knew, special. And being there as an athlete, those Saturdays, the fans, screaming for your team, screaming your name, calling Keith. Oh, it's priceless. So every time over the years that I go back to Ohio State, there's not one time I step in that stadium where I just don't see, I scored the end zone and that touchdown, that end zone. Or I caught a pass over here, made a block. And, just remember all the thoughts that go back through your mind. When the stadium's even empty, nobody's in the stadium. It could be, a cold day in March, I ride by the stadium. So last Saturday against Penn State, to be on that football field on a game on a football Saturday, and the fans, showing you love and appreciation. Oh man, it was just a wave of emotion, came over me. I was like, get me off this field because I'm pretty soon I'm gonna start crying.
Yeah,
it was just that special, and it's a night. And the Buckeyes won the game against Penn State. I'll think back 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years later. I want to live that long, by the way, and think about how special that Saturday night, in October was, and 2021 was to me and my family.
Yeah, and dude, you put the shoe. You put the shoe in the shoe, if you remember correctly, losing that shoe on that great run in that great comeback win against Illinois, losing your shoe on that long run, and that became legend. Just like that season was legend for you until, like you and I talked about before last time you were on here. The unfortunate ankle sprain on the last offensive play when you guys got beat at Wisconsin that year. You probably should have still won the Heisman, but it kept you from rolling up another 700 yards of rushing.
Oh yeah, man, we
the next 3 games.
Good yardage games coming up against Indiana. I mean, it was a high ankle sprain. Yeah. Never experienced that before, and my ankle really wasn't right until the offseason.
Of course,
but yes, I just got twisted on a cold, wet, damp field in Camp Randall Stadium. But toughness. We got a game next Saturday against Indiana. You got to play as much as you can until we get to game one. But yeah, I do remember that, and that season was special. It was a special season. Specifically for me and for for the team also, first and foremost. And I'll never forget it. Never ever forget those memories.
Well, the reason that team was special, that team is still special. It's always going to be special in your heart because it was the only team in the regular era of the Big Ten before they started the playoff, the championship game, to win the Big Ten outright. Y'all won the Big Ten outright with two losses. And that was because y'all never gave up on the year, even though you ran into a couple of roadblocks, and of course then you go to the Rose Bowl and you get beat, but still it was a tremendously cool season, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, of course everybody wants to be a national champion and win national championships and things of that nature, but sometimes you can't apply today's methodology to yesterday's methodology. We in the Big Ten in those days, we played 11 straight weeks. No bye. And people forget that. Not only no byes, no layups, no cupcakes on the schedule. Every week, 11 straight, your non-conference game was just as tough as your conference games. And winning the Big Ten was a major accomplishment. Winning whatever conference you was in was a big conference, but the Big Ten was special. We didn't care nothing about no SEC. We're like, please, you guys get a bye week plus you get cupcakes.
Yeah.
You know, you can go back and look at the schedule. You know, I'm not being disrespectful to other conferences like the Mid-American Conference and what is Conference Cincinnati? Is an American Athletic Conference.
American Athletic, yeah.
You know, all we played was quote unquote Power 5 schools and major independents. You know, the schedules, you know, doesn't lie. You know, during my 4 years at Ohio State. So I'm like, man, I wish I could have played some of those other schools and got some stats and things of that nature. So statistics, I always tell people, statistics only tell half the story of how good a person is. The eye test tells the other half. You know, of the story, you know, so otherwise you would just go with statistics and say, oh, this person is the greatest of all time. And you look what he did. And you're not always comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. You have to actually see the time, see the game of that era, of that time, you know, to rate, you know, how good or how bad a player is or a team is, you know, to get a true identity of, you know, how good they was. I mean, my freshman year, you know, we can go 9-3. You know, it was like 200, and it was another. We won like 8 straight games. We were probably the hottest team in the country, you know. And we ended up winning the Fiesta Bowl. We had a playoff or something like that. We ended up beating Michigan, but don't go to the Rose Bowl, don't win Big Ten championship. So a whole lot of things, you know, get lost in the sauce when you got the playoff era, the BCS era, and things of that nature. I mean, when I look at Ohio State's schedule now, being all honesty, you look at the 12 games on their schedule, year in and year out. Ohio State can throw their helmet out there and they're supposed to win 10 games. Yeah. It's like 1 to 2 games that's somewhat in doubt. You know, as long as Ohio State plays Ohio State football, they're going to win 10 games. There's only 2 games that somebody plays their best, Ohio State plays their best, then it might be a coin toss. You know, of the 12 regular season games. It's just the way scheduling is. How do you not win 10 games? It's a matter of, can you win these 1 or 2 other games on your schedule that's going to be somewhat of a challenge. And we didn't have that you know, that choice, you know, when we played. I mean, you look at my sophomore year, we played Washington State and Oklahoma, as well as the Big Ten schedule. And those teams, I mean, and then you look at the Big Ten that I played, you know, there's a generation of players today that can't remember how good Illinois was. They had been to Rose Bowls. You know, it was like, wow, you know, they was nothing from them to, you know, to beat Michigan or beat us, you know, because I shouldn't say nothing, but it was all every Saturday. It was a slugfest. So the year we won the Big Ten in '84 with 2 losses, it was week in and week out. You know, any given Saturday, anything could happen because the teams were, you know, that good and that deep, and not just great college players. A lot of those guys went on and played in the pros for multiple years. I mean, look at the quarterbacks, you know, that we had in the Big Ten at that time that went on and played on Sunday, from, you know, Chuck Long, Jack Trudeau, Mike Tomczak, just to name a few.
Jim Everett.
That played, Jim Everett, you know, 3rd pick of the draft. That went in and played in the National Football League. So great players and great times. And, you know, but you love it. That's what you sign up for. I want to play against the best of the best. So when you win the Big Ten in those days, that was a major accomplishment. Then if you happen to also win a national championship and be considered, because remember, we didn't have any playoffs. It was all voted on.
Oh, yeah.
It was, you know, you got 2 teams go 11-0, and we don't know who's going to be which game is a national championship game. So that's why conference wins meant more or as much as a national championship. National championship was just the cherry on top of the sundae. Yeah. You know, when Sunday still tastes good, whether you have a cherry or not. You got some whipped cream and ice cream, you're good.
Absolutely.
So that's how important it was. It's hard to get people to understand that today, because all y'all did was win because when Ohio State wins the Big Ten championship and celebrates in Indiana, it's like, okay, now what? Like, guys, you know how hard it is to win the Big Ten? Be happy and joyful that you won the Big Ten championship. Now y'all have a championship game. Don't look at that as lightly. Like, well, did we make it to the college football playoffs? You know, we did. You know, like all these. You know, like what's a successful season and what's not? That is a very successful season to win the Big Ten championship, to even qualify, you know, for the Big Ten championship. You know, that, you know, you got to just now how much more successful will it be? You know, so don't, you know, take that lightly. I'm glad they give the kids, you know, nice championship rings, one for win the Big Ten championship, one qualify. That's awesome, because when they look back on it, they're like, well, that's hard to do too. So it's all special, you know, and sometimes the fan base, takes it for granted. We're for us to be there. That's a lot of hard work that you don't see that goes into, making that opportunity to be there.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, and see, the thing about it is BCS came along, at least matched 1 versus 2, and then they go to the college football playoff. And now it's get in or, what'd you do? You know what I mean? It's get into that or what'd you do? And that's extremely unfortunate, I think, for college football. The more you make it more like the NFL, you know what I mean, in all kinds of ways. Like you said, a lot of the things that are special about college football kind of go by the wayside. But
not to mention the kids, the players that I'm not playing in the bowl game because I want to affect my draft status.
Yeah.
Why you worry about the draft? What about your, the commitment here at the university? It's been good to you and you good to it. Don't you want one more game to give your best effort?
Yeah.
No? Oh, wow. Because we're not playing in this particular bowl game, then I'm not going to play.
Yeah.
Like, I just couldn't imagine that. I mean, my senior year, I only played, 4 games or something like that?
Yeah.
I knew I was getting drafted. I no way I should have played in the bowl game. But I'm like, man, I don't want to go out on Ohio State on the sideline. I don't care. If I don't play the whole game, I never chance. I knew I wasn't healthy enough to play, but I'm like, not how I want to remember, my time at Ohio State. I want us to win this bowl game, and how much little or lot I can do to help win it, I'm going to go out here and do it. And I'll worry about, what happens on Sundays, somewhere down the line. Yeah. This is more important to me on Saturdays.
Yeah.
My commitment to the university.
By the way, we lost a little bit of your signal there when you were explaining that go play in that bowl game right at the beginning there. And of course, that was the bowl game against Citrus Bowl against Brigham Young in Orlando. Right. And I like to joke about that. I think you guys won 10-7, didn't you? Or I think it was 10-7.
10-7, yeah, I believe so.
And Ohio State had Keith Byars and Chris Carter on offense, and the only touchdown Ohio State scored was Larry Kolick. Middle guard on an interception or fumble return. I mean, what a bizarre game that was, right, Keith? Huh?
Right, but it was competitive. They had Robbie Bosco. They had some talent.
Yeah,
on the other sideline, and we had played them a few years earlier in the bowl game, so we knew how good Brigham Young was.
Oh yeah.
But if I'd have been healthy, we would have had more than we'd have had a couple of touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's knock on wood. That is correct. Hey, I want to get to you on this. A couple of reasons I wanted to have you on more than anything else is I wanted to ask you. I put you on assignment this week, but you're always on assignment. You're always watching Ohio State football. What has happened to the running game the last 2 weeks with this basically vaunted offensive line and Travion Henderson coming on like gangbusters as a freshman? Both Penn State and for the most part Nebraska have put up a pretty good defensive front against the run game. And as you watch this going on, are you concerned for Ohio State offensively in that regard? Or do you always look at it, Ohio State has a passing game that no one can stop consistently and they'll get by? But what have you seen from your very experienced eyes? What's going on with the run game at the moment?
Well, every year is different. During the off season, coaches and the players, they set their goals for the upcoming season, and you work on that throughout the off season. And then when the regular season starts, that's when you talk about your identity during the off season. During the season, you go out there and prove your identity, like who we are, what we're going to be, and how are we going to meet these particular goals. And going into this season, we knew we like Chris Olave is coming back. He's not going pro. Well, he was comfortable in practice knowing what type of quarterbacks that we had that was behind Justin Fields and who he can, he felt can still get him the football. Yeah. So passing game, just matter who's going to win the job to be able to, to spread it out. And then running wise, we knew we had some good running backs that we felt good, some incoming freshmen. Mayan Williams had really stepped up big at the end of the season last year, and we felt good about him. But off the running game wise, we haven't really trusted our identity of who we are going to be. Travion had a lot of success early, in the season. They don't know who is this guy. We don't have any film on him. Who is this guy? That could take a screen against Minnesota and take it to the house and running the ball. Like, wow, he is as good as advertised. Everything else. But film goes around. Other schools, they get to watch a film and see what Ohio State does and doesn't do so well. And let's try to exploit some things. And what other teams are doing, they're putting an extra guy in the box. Ohio State's non-commitment to the running game sometimes. This past Saturday when Ohio State played Nebraska, I think Coach Day had his worst game coaching as a head
Play
coach.
caller?
Caller in his tenure at Ohio State. That's okay. He's not perfect. Nobody's perfect. That was probably his worst game. And the time management, at the end of the first half, we have no time left on the clock, hit Chris Olave, and boom, halftime. We don't even get a field goal attempt because it was bad core clock management earlier in the half. And then in the second half, some of the same things happen. When you come out of a TV timeout and you get a delay a game, that's not acceptable. That's strictly on the coaching staff, not the players. So it wasn't our finest moment, from the coaching staff wise. And then, we are not taking advantage of certain areas. You're getting too predictable. You're running the same plays. It's okay to run the same plays, but you have to have the same plays with different makeup on it. And we're not doing that. And something I really in Nebraska.
Wait, let me interrupt you. Wait a minute. You broke up. Let me interrupt you. You broke up right there. Something you read. Go ahead. Start right there because this is very important as far as I'm concerned. Go ahead. Something you.
Something I read after the Nebraska game. There was a quote attributed to C.J. Stroud, and he said, "I get paid to throw the ball, not run the ball. Yeah. That's a running back's job. I'm not supposed to run." And I attribute that to being a young guy, making him stay. He didn't really know how big that comment was.
Yeah.
You'll get paid to play quarterback and execute. You're not really getting paid, first off. But your job is to play quarterback, and that's just not to throw the ball. That's to, get the offense moving. And sometimes you have to keep, we can't run. They're not calling RPOs, run pass option, because they're just calling straight handoffs because CJ's not missing. When they got a defensive end crashing down, he's supposed to keep it. He's not missing that call because they're not calling it because he's not going to run it. So teams aren't respecting that since they're getting an extra defender in there to hit TreVeyon Henderson. If he would pull it, it's wide open every time. Not every time, but 99% of the time, it is wide open. And even when he breaks the pocket in his passing game on rollouts, they know he's going to throw. He's not going to run. And that's the problem. And that's something that the coaches have to, you have to make him run to make teams respect it. Because when quarterbacks run on us, we have to respect it because they hurt our defense. When they, you saw in the Nebraska game, they ran that quarterback power ISO with the extra running back in there. We weren't ready. That hurts the defenses. And also, Ohio State has to get back to hanging our hat on running the football. Because we know we can throw it, but play action means nothing if you're not going to run the football. Nebraska, at one time in the game, they ran the ball 9 straight times on us. On one series, 9 straight times. I don't remember last time in the last 4 or 5 years, Ohio State has run the ball 5 straight times other than mop-up duty. That's a commitment to the running game, and Ohio State has to get back to doing that. And it's only one football. I'm not saying let's stop throwing the ball. I'm saying move the chains, but don't get stuck in the only way we can move the chains is by throwing the football. I want to see Ohio State when it's 3rd and 3 or less. That's a 50-50 play. We can run the ball for 3 yards and we can throw the ball for 3 yards. It's not now we're 3rd and 2 or more or 3rd and 1 or more. We're going to pass.
Yeah.
On 4th down, it's okay to run the ball on 4th down if we go for it. That toughness has to come from within. I was fortunate when I was at Ohio State. I had a lot of great offensive linemen. And we would be in a huddle, and it's 3rd and 3, and Kurt Loudermilk or Jim Lachey would yell at me in the huddle, talking about, "Keith, can you get a yard?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's 3rd and 3. We're going to block our guy for 2. Can you get 1?" I'm like, yes! That's the kind of confidence that I like to hear out of my offensive linemen because they're like, "Man, we're going to block it good enough for 2. Can you get 1?" I'm like, "Well, it's 3rd and 3. Well, if you get 1, I know I can. You're going to block it for 2. I can get more than that."
Oh my God.
So that's the kind of confidence that you want to see out of your offensive linemen. It's like, "Coach, they come to the sideline. Why are we throwing the ball, Coach? I got my guy. Let's run it." And then it's easier to pass block when that defensive lineman has to respect the run. Otherwise, they're going to keep rushing the quarterback and not respecting the run. I mean,
Yeah.
Not very often Ohio State is going to throw the ball 50 times and win.
Yeah.
That's not a winning formula for any college football team, certainly not Ohio State. And we got away with that against Nebraska, throwing the ball 54 times and still winning. But like I said, hopefully that's just an aberration. And Coach Day and the staff were working on that all week to get back to Ohio State football, which I heard Coach Day talking earlier, which is balance. That's all successful programs has to have that balance. Alabama won a national championship, had the Heisman Trophy winner, but they ran the football quite a bit,
Yes.
as well as throwing the ball off it. That's perfect balance, and we've had it in the past here at Ohio State. Also, that's what we got to get back to, and that means mixing in Trevion and Mayan Williams or whatever running backs we have. We got to keep everybody, healthy and moving, and can't be one-dimensional. That's how we want to make our defense make the other offenses one-dimensional. We don't want to turn into a one-dimensional offense.
Yeah, and that's the reason, like the last two games, Ohio State has had trouble in the red zone scoring a touchdown, and it happened again on Saturday. I mean, you remember against Penn State, I think they made 6 trips into the red zone, scored one rushing touchdown, kicked 4 field goals, and they had that 4th down play to Chris Olave, pass to Chris Olave, that he and Stroud weren't on the same page there, and the ball fell incomplete. And then again on Saturday, they had this past Saturday at Nebraska, they had trouble in the red zone. And that's all about being able to run the ball, or the threat that you can run the ball. Right. And the other thing, Bob, go ahead.
No, you're spot on, because not only you got to be able to run the ball to make them respect it, and then the threat of run the ball, because that's when the play action passes, the way you can hit the tight end. You can hit the slants and that quick outs, because now they have to play you honest. They can't cheat. Defense, those linebackers are so good at this level. When you look at Nebraska, they have really good linebackers. They didn't know they could step into the passing zone because they knew we weren't going to run the ball. We weren't going to be successful. And sometimes when they got a 4-man front and they're playing a 4-4 defense, 4 linebackers and 4 defensive linemen, hey, just sometimes quit running these slow developing running plays. Let's just line up and run downhill at people. That way our big offensive linemen don't have to reach block. They can come off and just hit the guy up under the chin strap and knock him off the ball. You got those 300+ pounds, you guys, use them. Don't make them go lateral. Let them go north-south. That's how you stop a running back, by making them go east-west. You see a good running back, when he gets his shoulder square going north-south, good things are happening. But when your running back are running parallel to the line of scrimmage, that's defensive love that. Okay, he's trying to turn the corner. We're setting the edge. So we have to be the aggressors in offense. That's aggressive, football. Run the ball downhill at people. And then you mix in, running east-west, going lateral. But overall, with our big guys, you got big DeJuan Jones at one left tackle, right tackle, Nick Petit-Ferret at the other one, and all that beef in between at center and guard. Let's just run at people. They expect us to hit them in the mouth. Let's not disappoint them. Hit them in the mouth, and then it opens up everything else.
Hell, run a damn wedge play, man. They don't let you run that on kickoffs anymore, but you can run it in a real regular play,
Yeah, but that's the big on big. You got the advantage of physicality. Yeah. Use it. You don't. Why play finesse when you can be physical? But and that's what those guys like that better.
Think about it on Trevion's 68-yard. He finally broke out against Penn State there. In the second half, that 68-yard run was right up the middle, because they just ran right at those guys. They didn't try to get cute. And you're exactly right. And then Saturday, this is what bothered me this past Saturday was they had something going finally in the running game when they had that drive to try to run out the clock. And then all of a sudden they run a pass play. I mean, they literally had Nebraska on its heels, and then suddenly call another pass play. Because, Ryan Day has a lot of plays at his disposal. And you saw CJ Stroud get stripped of the ball. They're lucky Luke Whippler fell on it. And then they were able to at least get back in position to kick one more field goal and pretty much ice the game there with a 9-point lead. But oh my goodness,
you don't put your defense under duress. But okay, just don't don't let them score a touchdown.
Right.
Now we got a 2-score lead. Wow. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
That was a big play by Luke Whippler. Very big play.
Yes. Definitely.
But that goes back to why are we even throwing the ball? And like I said, Ryan Day had that's part of his bad day. And I'm sure that's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
And but it goes back to having confidence, in setting your identity and your goals of who you are during off season. This is where it pays dividends now.
Yeah.
You know, put on that work, and we have the wherewithal. And I'm glad we're having this conversation after a win. You know, it'd be a lot tougher to have this conversation if Ohio State would have stubbed a toe against Penn State or against, Nebraska. Like, man, shoulda, woulda, coulda. We threw for 400 yards, and yet we let that one get away. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what film study's all about. And, the guys, they can, use this as a learning lesson and move on, to next week. I did something that CJ Stroud said. It's almost like March Madness. Well, the college football season is March Madness. It's
yes.
NFL. It's a long 17-game season. It's a marathon, not a sprint. College football, it is a sprint. Yeah. Every game matters because it's not like you're going to get to play all these different conferences throughout the season. You only got your 12 games that's on your schedule. Every one of them matters. So it is a sprint. So now, yes, we stubbed our toe in week 2, but if you want to go to college football playoffs, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where it's going to be a 2-loss team that gets in there and you don't want to hope to rely. So if Ohio State wants to be in the playoffs have started in week 3. They have to just keep out. I don't really worry so much about rankings right now. And I come out after, come today on Tuesday when the final rankings come out. And not the final, with this particular week's rankings come out, I believe Ohio State would be in position. It'd be one of the 4, but that doesn't mean nothing now.
Yeah.
The second week of December, or first week of December, when that's the one you want to be in, in one of the 4 teams with a chance, to be there.
Yeah, and then, I think that you believe this too. Ohio State wins out, it's going to get to the college football playoff if it wins out. I mean, that would mean winning the Big Ten championship and knocking down these teams in front of them. But I want to get to this with you. 1984 was the first year I covered Ohio State football, and as I told you before we started this, the first loss I ever covered in covering Ohio State football as a beat writer was at Purdue. That 28-23 loss you guys suffered over there, a game that definitely we rehashed the next week over and over because that was a game y'all kind of let slip through your fingertips, your fingers a couple of times, and it included the ignominy of a frantic last-second drive by you guys where things got discombobulated and Mike Tomczak threw the ball out of bounds to stop the clock on 4th down. And
we thought it was 3rd down. It was the yardage marker was kind of slow to move it to 4th.
Yeah.
Like is it 3rd down? It was still 3rd down. And I knew it was 4th down, and I yelled at Mike, but it was too late.
Yeah.
Like, no. And,
but if you remember,
that happens.
But you remember, you guys what set that up really was y'all had a play. I think you caught a ball to the right sideline, if I remember correctly, and there was an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty called on both teams because the guy that came over to try to tackle you, I think it was you. It might have been Wooldridge, but I think it was you. But anyway, you got knocked out of bounds. That guy got knocked out of bounds. He did something. Somebody else did something, and they marked off 15 yards against them. And that set the line of scrimmage. And they marked off 15 yards against you guys. And so really what you had was a 1st and 25. Do you remember any of that? It was crazy.
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, Chris Carter got kicked out of that game too for something that should not have happened. I don't think I disagree with Chris getting kicked out, but it was him and the defensive back from Purdue got into it. I'm like, what do you mean ejection? This is crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't remember all those particular, but I do remember that now that you said it was 1st and 25.
Yeah.
With a 1st down.
Yeah, and you caught a ball on, I think, 3rd down. It was short of the 1st down. And Mike might have thought, because the clock kept running because you got tackled in bounds, I think it was. One of the few times you ever got tackled that year.
Yeah.
As I like
Not
to
too
say.
often.
Yeah. But anyway, but I think Mike probably thought y'all had a 1st down, or you did the thing flip, who knows? But I wanted to ask you this. This is what I'm leaning to. Man, Purdue a couple of times has really stirred the pot against Ohio State. And, everybody remembers 3 or 4 years ago over at Purdue when they had that Rondale Moore and they had that great just upset victory over Ohio State. I think you guys were number 2 in the country when they beat y'all that year.
Sports Illustrated had us number 1, but it was number 2 in some of those polls.
Oh, yeah. I mean, seriously, that was a great football team. We've already said that though. We prefaced with that.
Jim Everett, Rod Woodson.
Oh yeah,
Strickland, they had some talent.
Oh yeah. But I'm talking about you guys was a great football team. I mean, talk about some talent, but what is it? Can a game be a trap game? Because we're going to be talking about this all week. Because Purdue's coming off upsetting Michigan State. You know, Michigan State was previously undefeated and number 3 in the college football playoff rankings, the first college playoff rankings, and really kind of stumped them over there last week. I know you're aware of that, but can a game be a trap game if everybody's telling you, hey, look out, that's a trap game?
Yeah, it can be. It can be. You remember who you're dealing with. You're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds for the most part. And as much as Mel Tucker was telling this party, Purdue, they've already beat one top-ranked team.
Yeah.
You know, they're coming after you. But we just beat Michigan. You know, his message, as hard as he tried, it just did not get through to them. And they came out, you know, flat against Purdue this past Saturday. And then they thought, okay, now we got it back 7-7. Things, you know, we're gonna start to run through. Wait a minute, when they're, you know, Purdue kept on punching at them all game long, and time ran out before Michigan State can get back in it. But they got outplayed. So, Coach Day, he's got that same job, you know, that Mel Tucker just had. You know, and I think Ohio's tennis because they're not coming off their best game of the season the last couple of weeks. And some of those guys on the Ohio State roster remembers 2018. You know, you know. So I don't think Coach Day is going to have any problem getting Ohio State players' attention this particular week of how important this is, and we want to meet our goals. Purdue is standing in our way. This team is hungry. Purdue is hungry. They have more wins than anybody in the country against top 4 teams. They beat the number 2 team in the country, number 3 team in the country. Hey, I don't know where I didn't get a chance to see where Ohio State is at yet, but Ohio State's going to be one of the top 5 teams at least in the country. They're coming after you, and that's a heck of a resume, you know, for Purdue, who still has mathematically a chance to win the Big Ten West.
Yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
know, so some of their goals are still in front of them as well, and so it's going to be, you know, some kind of game this Saturday. I'm going to be in the stadium, you know, watching. So I don't have to worry about watching on TV this week. I'm going to watch it live, and you know, I'm expecting, you know, perfect world for me. Ohio State wins the game, number 1. Number 2, win it convincingly, and then number 3, get some payback for 2018. Don't ease up off the gas.
Yeah,
you know, try to put 50 or 60 on the board. You
but
know?
it is funny how this gauntlet. I mean, this gauntlet just ramped up as this season went along. Because Nebraska, as I pointed out in a tweet, you know, they had not lost by more than 8 points going into that game the other day, and they included games against Oklahoma.
That's really unusual. With 6 losses, and you don't have any losses by 7. You don't get blown out, none of them. Ooh.
Yeah. So Ohio State blows them out by 9.
Yes. But that's the point. Coach Day last week, I'm sure he was having that same conversation.
Oh, yeah.
This is the best 6-loss team in the country. Yeah. And the message didn't sink in with Ohio State player where they got 6 losses. They're not that good, Coach. You know, and then they got out there this past Saturday. They are that good, Coach. That defense is pretty aggressive. No, they make plays. All their receivers can get open and break a tackle and score at any place on the field. Now you got their attention. So after 2 weeks, you know, I know Coach Day didn't have any problem. I mean, we knew who Penn State was, even though Penn State had a tough loss, you know, against Illinois. Again, they stepped in a trap against Illinois before to Ohio State. You know, Michigan State, you know, stepped in the trap because they got relaxed after beating Michigan. This is a heck of a Big Ten season. It's far from over. We got 3 weeks to go. It is far from over. Yeah.
I mean, Illinois beats Minnesota. Are you kidding me? You know? I mean, this past week, nobody, you know, Illinois has been that spoiler all year, you know, I mean, in some form of
on
fashion.
the road. They went in Minnesota and whipped them.
Yeah. Don't play Purdue and don't play Illinois and you'll be all right. Hey, Keith. Hey, last thing, man. You know, I don't want to blow smoke. I don't want this to sound like I'm blowing smoke, you know where. But do you think you have any shot at the Pro Football Hall of Fame? But just what's your thought on that? When you look at your career in the NFL, it was 13 years. You were one of those players who kind of changed the game, in my opinion. I mean, that H-back kind of like utility kind of dude. I mean, you ran
Right.
for over 3,000 yards, but you caught passes for over 6,000. You were a hell of a blocker at the point of attack, or, I mean, I'm not trying to, get your hopes up, because I know you're a realistic guy, but what do you think about that, man?
Well, that's a good question. It's a good question, number one. When every year during the Hall of Fame nominations and then the final ballot and they announce who made the Hall of Fame, I sit around and, with some of my different football players from my era and things, and we laugh and joke. And I'm like, and the consensus is, I'm like, man, you know what? I don't know what a Hall of Famer is.
Yeah.
And I said, why? I said, the reason why I don't know what a Hall of Famer is in the NFL is too many different variables, too many different type of voters. And, what the people are calling great, I'm not going to name names. I'm like, that guy's not a Hall of Famer. I mean, then guys that aren't in the Hall of Fame, he's certainly a Hall of Famer. And it's a lot of politics come in. So the long and short of that answer, I think I might go in the Hall of Fame in the National Football League when the attitude changes. Right now, I think it's only one fullback in, Larry Zonka.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not too many fullbacks. And Larry Zonka was the fullback, but he really was the main ball carrier.
Yeah.
So so when they start to put in players, then maybe
stop
the
a
senior
second.
committee
You broke up right there.
Broke up right
there. You said when they start to put in what? When they start to put in
when
what?
they start to put in non-traditional, players, then I might make it. I remember during my playing career, players are coming to Keith, I wanted to vote for you for the Pro Bowl, but I didn't know where to vote for you at.
Yeah.
You're not a traditional running back, because when during my era, the four running backs from every conference went to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
And they went, well, who was a rushing? It was the AFC rushing leader or the NFC rushing leader. And they just went, who was second, who was third, who was fourth. Okay, we got them.
Yeah.
So very seldom did somebody out of the top four make it to the Pro Bowl. And then they started to put in special teamers. Well, I wasn't a special team player, so then they got to go. And then they finally added the fullback. Then I went. They didn't put the fullback in the Pro Bowl until my 8th year in the league. I'm like, how many Pro Bowls did I miss out on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of that. And now, like you said, that position I played, I'm still the closest person that came to do what I was doing was Aaron Hernandez with the New England Patriots, because they would put him in the backfield every blue moon and let him run the football.
Yeah.
But nobody would line up at when I broke the huddle and knew exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
Nobody's done that since. I mean, I played fullback, I played tailback, I played tight end, I played slot receiver, I played outside receiver. I would, we go to 4 wides, I'm the 4th receiver. We go to 3 wides, I'm the 3rd receiver. We go to 2 tights, I'm the 2nd tight end. And, I had a lot of, success that way, throughout my career, and you never knew where I was going to be. And so now what they call a hybrid player, I was like, yeah, but these are he's not quite, I understand what they're saying. He's an H-back, but he's never going to be in the backfield carrying the football. He's going to be a lead blocker. He's almost be like a fullback. But so when me to go in the Hall of Fame, they first got to start putting fullbacks in, and so somebody like myself, Mike Allstott, Moose Johnson, Daryl Johnson for the Cowboys, when they start putting that era of in, because I'm like, if one of those guys going before me, I'm gonna have a problem.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah.
But like I said originally, I don't know what an NFL Hall of Fame is, because it is constantly changing. I remember I was in a debate with Gary Myers from the New York Daily News, used to be on HBO. And I said, Gary, you vote for the Hall of Fame. I said, my problem is you don't wait until a player's career is over with and evaluate his whole career and then decide whether or not he's a Hall of Famer. He said, yeah, I do. I said, no, you do not, because I hear you write and talk about players and they're only in their 3rd and 4th year of their career, and you already have them in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. So, and then another player who you didn't say this about, his first 4 or 5 years in his career, and then he goes on to play 8 or 9 or 10, 11 years, and then because you didn't name him as a Hall of Famer early, he doesn't get consideration later, instead of just letting the player's career play out.
Yeah.
And then say, yes, I mean, this particular week, I was reading about Odell Beckham when he got released from the Cleveland Browns. And they were saying he was headed to the Hall of Fame when he was with the New York Giants.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? The worst thing that happened to Odell Beckham, he made that great catch with the New York Giants against the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Up until that point, his career was on an upward arc. And then all of a sudden, he thought, I'm the greatest receiver of all time, and I deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm like, why y'all keep calling this guy a superstar? The numbers and the attitude and the play is not matching up what I deem a Hall of Famer. One other comment on that. A few years, a couple years before he passed away, great defensive lineman for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I was at an appearance with him, L.C. Greenwood.
Yeah.
And I asked L.C., I said, L.C., why aren't you in the Hall of Fame? You had a Hall of Fame career. You were Pro Bowls, Super Bowl championships, and everything else. Why aren't you in the Hall of Fame? And he said, Keith, the year I was a finalist, I didn't go in the Hall of Fame, and they put in a kicker. They put Jan Stenerud in. And I was like, they said, Elsie, just be patient. We got too many Steelers in the Hall of Fame right now.
Yeah.
You just got to wait. And he's like, either I am or I'm not. What does that mean? Too many Steelers in the Hall of what does that have to do with how good I was? So now, as you see, a year attention you play for, and the time you play, you got a greater opportunity, to make it. Now, I think it's a travesty of justice that the Cincinnati Bengals only have one player that's in the Hall of Fame. How did the Cincinnati, all the great players that went in and out of Cincinnati, I'm not a Bengal fan or anything else, but I'm fair. How is Anthony Munoz the only Bengal Hall of Famer?
Yeah.
Ken Riley has the second most interceptions in NFL history, 65 interceptions at a time when teams weren't throwing the ball 40 times a game.
Yeah.
How is he not in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
I just don't understand.
Rattler.
That's just ridiculous to me. Yeah. And then I talked to Hall of different writers like yourself. Do you ever vote, Tim?
No,
Hall of Fame?
No, I don't.
But I would say, when I asked the definition of what a Hall of Famer is, and I said my definition of a Hall of Famer is a great player who was dominant at his position, during his era.
Yes.
And what I said earlier to you is the stats don't tell the whole story. And, that only tells half the story, and how he played determines how great he is. And a lot of times when I have discussions with people who have votes for the Hall of Fame, they'll talk about how many Super Bowl rings this guy has.
Right.
And wait a minute, don't talk to me about Super Bowl rings. That's a team award. Hall of Fame is not a team award. That's an individual award. So when you see an offensive lineman go in the Hall of Fame, like let's say a guard or a center makes it to the Hall of Fame, I said, do y'all actually watch this guard or center every week, week in and week out? You don't never write about him. And then it's like it be a popularity vote on why that particular guard or center made it to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you don't hear to come on Monday after the games on Sunday. You never talk about that right guard was dominating this minute. You guys see the right guard for the Cleveland Browns do this, that. Nobody talks about it. But you talk about if the tackle gave up 4 sacks, or talk about sacks. So and then they the writers themselves don't know how good an offensive lineman is. There's of course they could talk about a tackle as long as he's not giving up sacks, and everybody talks about how good he is. And by the time he is, you see in Orlando Pace, he's pretty special. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. But even when Orlando played, you wouldn't talk about him on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday about how great a game he had on Sunday. So it gets to almost be, guys aren't doing their whole research on actually watching the game, and when you're voting, having an educated vote on what it is. And then the popularity, if I like this guy, if I don't like him, he's not going to get my vote. He was always nice and kind and gave me an interview. He's a good guy. I'm going to give him my vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that have to do with what the person did between the white lines?
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't understand. So
exactly.
That's why I say I really don't know what a Hall of Famer is.
Yeah.
But it's a good question, and I love to have that discussion with you.
But no, real quick though, it's really I didn't even know we'd go that long on that, because you're basically talking right down my alley there. But I look at that steel curtain defense, you're talking about with L.C. Greenwood. Without L.C. Greenwood, Mean Joe Green, I think those guys, you know what I mean? They set they made everybody else better. I mean, I really do think there are what do you want to call it? Wheel horses on lines that make everybody else better. I thought Orlando Pace made that whole offense better. You could see it, but you've got to appreciate it. And what drives me nuts, really, the whole time I've been a sports writer is most of the time the postseason All-American teams, the linemen, for the most part, are the same guys that were voted preseason All-American linemen, if you follow my drift. So it's like you said, who the hell watches the linemen, right? But like right now, you're watching Ohio State and you're seeing some guys come of age, like that Tyleek Williams kid, number 91, he's freshman on Ohio State defensive line. Nobody can block him. He's not getting to play as much as maybe he should. But then you're seeing the defensive ends really cut Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison really coming on like you thought they would play at the beginning of the year, but if you just remember them from like a certain game earlier, because how many times, like you said, do you notice an offensive lineman, you notice defensive linemen if they make a sack,
Sure.
That's what I told Nick Bosa one time. I said, you guys only got to make 1 or 2 sacks a game. Everybody thought you had a great day.
You had a great day.
Yeah.
How many times you lose contained?
Yeah.
How many times you let the running back get into your gap?
Yeah, exactly.
But like on the Ohio State offense line, the left tackle, Nick Petit-Ferret, having a heck of a year.
Yeah.
You switch from right tackle to left tackle. Nobody talks about how good he's playing. How often do we hear his name on Saturdays for holding, offsides? Hardly ever.
Yeah.
He's a great kid and having a heck of a year. Same way. He's not playing off and not getting enough credit for it.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know how it's all going to end for those guys, but like I said, it gets to be a popularity contest.
Yeah.
To a certain degree on certain positions. I mean, and then other guys, like for example, when with the All-American this year, will Ohio State receiver make All-American?
Yeah.
Or would 2 of them make it? Or I don't know. But when you watch Ohio State receivers, you're like, well, who's playing better than these guys being a complete receiver? They block, they catch the ball, they get yards after the catch. But then it gets to be a popularity contest. Well, who's the receiver at Alabama? Who's the receiver at this school? Who's the defensive back at this school? They got to have another guy that we got to push. Like LSU had defensive backs 3 or 4 years in a row that they got to make sure they make All-American.
Hey, Keith, the funny thing about it is Ohio State's got Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, who didn't get to play on Saturday, we think because of concussion protocol. We'll find out more. But then Jackson Smith and Jigba, all he did was catch 15 balls, the most in Ohio State history in a game. But then Alabama's basically their biggest threat is a guy who was in that Ohio State receiver room a year ago, Jameson Williams.
Yes.
I mean, wow, what an era or what a moment in time for Ohio State produced receivers. But I want to tell you this, the main reason I think you deserve a spot possibly in the Hall of Fame is because you changed the game. Coaches were smart enough to understand your utility. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
And that changed things. Then, like I said, when Mike Vrabel, when he ended up going from the Steelers to the Patriots, he was a man without a position. Bill Belichick figured out a way to how to play Mike Vrabel, and then suddenly everybody was looking for the next Mike Vrabel. Well, everybody started looking for the next Keith Byars. I mean, they really did.
That's a good point. When I went to New England, when Bill Parcells was the head coach and Belichick was defense coordinator, first thing Parcells told me, I need you to do for me what you did against me all those years in Philly.
Yeah.
He said, I need you. That's why I need you here in New England. Bring your leadership and your playmaking ability to these Patriots and help us, change the culture around here. So I was part of those seeds of the Patriots' success today. Super Bowl 31. I get there in '96. That was the Patriots, first Super Bowl in 10, 11 years.
Yeah.
And that foundation that we laid in '96 is still prevalent, 25 years later.
Yes.
And Belichick was part of that foundation of let's change the culture around here in New England. And I was a part of that. And so New England's success, that's, one of my homes too. I feel, comfortable with them because that's what Parcells told me. I need that. Bring that here.
Yeah.
And then they started bringing in other, like the Vrabel, a few years, after me. And when you go to New England and you say this the Patriot way, that is the Patriot way. Being adaptable, being able to win, and it's about the team and not about the individual. Individually have individual success, but the team is the most important thing. We win together as a team.
It's about being a football player, that. And the funny thing, that's what I've always thought, even though coaches can have their own biases, who watches more video of football players than coaches? You know what I mean? Maybe they should have more of a say in Hall of Fame, but some of those guys coach until they can't stand up anymore and then they move on. You know what I mean? But
but I would like to see the Hall of Fame have the media gets X amount of players in the Hall of Fame, and then the former players and coaches, they get, 2 or 3 players a year who they want to vote in. And then, because never going to be a perfect marriage. But right now it's imperfect, but only the media votes for a Hall of Famer. Yeah. And I think the former players, ought to get a vote, especially if you played, within, 20 years of a guy, So, for example, if I played in the 80s, I get to vote on guys that played in the 70s and the guys that played in the 90s, maybe even early 2000s. That's because it's hard to ask the guy who last played was 1975 to vote for a guy whose last game was in 2015. That's a little different era. But if you play within 10 or 10 years either way, that's pretty much the same era. I define an era, by 25 years. The 10 years, 10, 12 years in front of you, 10, 12 years after you. That's kind of, you guys are pretty much, in the same era. And last thing, speaking of eras, a couple years ago, when the NFL celebrated their 100-year anniversary, and I said I defined an era by 25 years, and I said, what was the best 25-year period of the NFL? Which were the best? And I said, for me, 1970 to 1995. Was the best the NFL ever been. That era of all the players that played in that period, that group of players was probably the best of the best of that whole 100-year period. Because you look at that 25-year period, of course, there's a couple of outliers like Jim Brown didn't play at that time, Bart Starr, but all the greatest Cowboys played in that era.
Yeah.
Same with the Steelers, the Miami Dolphins, the San Francisco 49ers, et cetera, et cetera. And, you brought in a whole lot different defenses at that time, 46 defense, the shotgun, the offense, spread defense, spread offense, whole bunch of different variety of offenses and defenses changed during that 25-year period that we still are feasting, on today. It was, quote unquote, real football.
Yes.
Guys get tackled, to the ground or whatever, pushing you out of bounds. And it was more of a physical game. I mean, Tom Brady, God bless him, he had a great career. There's no way Tom Brady is playing in 43, 44 years old under the rules that we had between 1970 and 1995. His body wouldn't allow him, to be able to take that much contact. When he releases the ball and a defender is 2 steps away, he can still get a hit on the quarterback from as long as you don't grab his face mask.
Yeah.
Now you can't hit a quarterback above the shoulder pads or below the thigh pads.
But I want to tell you something. They had to fix that because, man, you're right. Turkey, I just think about all these guys who used to just tee off. I'm surprised quarterbacks got up. Back then. I think you agree with me, don't you? You're standing there. You're a sitting.
Well, that was still unnecessary roughness even then. In those days, that's that.
Yeah.
That wasn't a legal play with Joe Turkey Doe. That was still wrong in any era.
Oh, yeah.
But I think intimidation has to be a part of football.
Yeah.
And with the rules, for the most part, they take intimidation away. When you catch a ball across the middle, there's a price to be paid. Whether you're the offensive player, hey, I'm not respecting your price, and that's why I can come here and catch the ball and take the hit and get up and do it again. And now, you sure you want to hit me again? Or you get the other guy, we call him alligator arms, guy, the receiver, good speed. They don't want to reach out and catch that ball. That's part of intimidation. That's the game. The same thing, in baseball. When you throw an inside pitch to a batter, you're going to automatically warn both dugouts. Like, wait a minute, give the other dugout a chance. And if I'm up the bat and you're not going to pitch me inside or you're not going to throw me down the middle or outside corner, yes, I should hit it for a better average. The pitcher can't intimidate you. Back off the plate. You're a little too close.
Hey, man, we could talk for 4 hours here, but I don't have that much time. But I do say that, just think though, in hockey, you can still have a fist fight with a guy right in the middle of the rink. Imagine if you'd let that happen in football. You know what I mean? Oh my goodness. Can you? Talk about.
We don't have that, but just let us, be physical back with you.
Yeah.
How are you a defenseless receiver? And I'm an offensive guy. How are you a defensive receiver and you have the football? Protect yourself.
Yeah.
And as a defender, why would you lower your head? See what you hit.
Yeah.
Because that's when the majority of injuries happen, when you're lowering your head.
Yeah.
See what you hit. So that goes back to teaching how to play football the right way. And it's a physical game. When you put your face in there and blow your neck, you're not going to get as hurt nowhere near as much as you are when you duck your head and expose your spinal column.
Yeah.
That comes back to being physical, comes back to learning how to play the game the right way. And a lot of guys are, fake tough guys. You're not that tough. You don't want to take on this running back, square it up, but he's not looking, then you want to, tee off. But, that was one of the things that worked in my favor, being a big guy, being a big running back. I knew defensive backs where they were going to go. How often are you going to go try to take me up high? Advantage me. And sorry, you should have, don't blame. I mean, when I got to the Eagles, Herman Edwards was he was the corner. He got released later on that training camp, but Herman was telling me, man, your big behind come around this corner. If you ain't limping, I'm not tackling you. That's my job. He said, that front seven, if you ain't stumbling, bumbling, come around that corner, I'm not about to get you. I started laughing. I said, hey, are you silly? Like, oh, man, that ain't my job. I'm supposed to tackle wide receiver. Not full speed running backs.
Yeah. Hey, there's a reason. And there's a reason why they put big guys on the lines, because they're intimidating if they're on the move. I mean, no, you're exactly right. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, they're just trying to find a way for football to survive, in this litigious and also medically more astute era, man. And
I'm all about
I give it up to them on that.
But don't add 17 games to the season and say we care about player safety.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't do that, because it's about money more over safety. But I'm all about protecting the players, but I still want to see the purity of the game.
Yeah.
Whenever you're allowing a guy on both sides of the ball to get a good, clean, hard hit, and that's okay. I mean, it's not my fault that you don't. Everybody you taught early, keep your head on the swivel. So if a running back or offensive player cracked back on a block and he didn't clip him, why is that a penalty?
Yeah.
Because you didn't see me. That's not my fault. You're not having any awareness.
Yeah. It's an aircraft carrier out here. You know what I mean? Aircraft carrier deck. Keep your head on the swivel.
Yes, we're supposed to.
Hey, before we go, give me one quick answer to this. And I appreciate, by the way, you have a show every week, a couple of shows every week on what? WING? Where we give people some background where you are now. Huh?
I'm Wing AM here in Dayton, Ohio. 1460 WING, Wing AM, the ESPN affiliate here in Dayton. So I do the Keith Byars show every Monday from 12 to 1. And then every Sunday during the football season from 11:30 to 1, I do a Buckeye post-game wrap-up and the preview of the Bengals, Browns, and whole NFL action every Sunday here live in Dayton, Ohio at Fricker's restaurant. And then during the high school football season, they're still in the playoffs, but during the regular season, I do color. I do game of the week for 1410 ESPN every Friday night. I'm a football lifer, so I love watching high school football on Friday, college football on Saturday, and pro on Sunday and Monday. So I love football. It's going to be a part of my life forever.
Dayton Roth, what do you guys do when it comes to a homecoming? Y'all don't have a school anymore. I mean, where do you go?
We just have gatherings throughout the year. I mean, this past March, Dayton Roth High School celebrated our 1981 state championship in basketball. Yeah. And so everybody came back, who was still with us. One teammate deceased and the head coach is gone, but everybody else, we got together and it was a big old love fest. And then I was teasing them. I said, guess what, guys? I get to come back next year because I went back to back. You guys graduated. So I'm back here next year in 2022, celebrating another state championship. They're like, ah. So it was fun. So we get together, had a cookout this summer also. So the Falcons are still here. No building, no high school, but the Dayton Roth spirit is alive and well kicking here in Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah. You can't get rid of what's in your heart, right? I mean, that's the
right.
deal, man. Hey.
Yeah, I'm a diehard Roth Falcon in high school, 100% Buckeye for life, and I'm an NFL player. Eagles, Patriots, Dolphins, Jets.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got all kinds of reunions you can go to.
Yes.
hey, Keith, I want to ask one last thing, and just give me a quick answer if you feel like it. The most impressive player to you on the Ohio State football team to now, and by impressive, I don't necessarily mean the most stats, whatever. Who's a guy that of late has jumped out to you that could be a difference maker down the stretch?
Ooh. Oh my God.
Either side of the ball.
Chris Olave. I think we don't feature him nowhere near as much, but in my opinion, he's the best. And I said earlier, I don't like to get into the best and all that stuff, but he's the best route runner Ohio State's ever had.
Wow.
As a wide receiver. I didn't say he was the best receiver Ohio State ever had, but the whole route tree, I haven't seen a wide receiver run better routes from a comeback to a slant to a go route, the post route, better than Chris Olave. And, we need to isolate him more in one-on-one situations, because if he's one-on-one, he's going to win 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for the one mistake against Clemson on a miscommunication with him and Justin Fields, I think we had another national championship. Yeah, because we now throw the ball to him. Just a little miscommunication, but Chris Olave is very, very special.
Gotcha. Hey, Keith Byars, thanks once again for joining the Tim May podcast. I can't wait till I get to be on the Keith Byars show one of these days, man.
Well, I'm going to get you on. I promise. I'll get you on.
Hey, but man, I appreciate it, Keith. You know that, man.
All right. Appreciate it. I tell him anytime.
Yes, that was a long interview with Keith Byars, ladies and gentlemen. It was definitely worth it. Sorry about a couple of the audio quality moments of dropouts, but when you're relying on technology, sometimes even technology gives you a little bit of a backseat. But awesome. It's always great to have these former Buckeyes on, especially of repute, the sort of Keith Byars, right?
Yeah, one of the all-time greats, as you said, and it's on that list of maybe top 5 college football players of all time who maybe got shortchanged in that Heisman race. Hard to relitigate all that stuff, but he's certainly getting that Hall of Fame nod does validate that a little bit. He's recognized as one of the better players to ever put on that uniform for Ohio State. Yes,
absolutely. But it's a long list of Ohio State Hall of Famers, college football Hall of Famers. We are covering quite the program, right?
It's a blast every day, and we're lucky to be able to do it and follow along with the soap opera and drama and a bunch of wins along the way.
Hey, here's what we know for sure going into Saturday's game with Purdue. Purdue is going to come in throwing the ball. They may run a little bit just to keep everybody all on their toes. They're going to come in throwing the ball just like they did against Michigan State. I think over 500 yards passing by O'Connell. And as I tweeted, somebody better cover David Bell, man. You're not going to probably shut him out, but you gotta bring some, you got to bring some blunt force there occasionally. I mean, because this guy is the real deal. Think about what we're going to see on Saturday. We're going to see David Bell and a couple other really pretty good receivers for Purdue. And we're going to see Chris Olave. Probably Garrett Wilson will be back after having missed last week's game, as you reported. And, do believe he was dealing with some concussion protocol there. And then Jackson Smith-Njigba, all he did this past weekend was catch a school record 15 passes for 240 yards. And ironically, that 240 yards matches David Bell. David Bell's 240, which were the tie for the 5th most yards in a single game receiving in the nation in college football this year. So, wow, did Jackson Smith-Njigba have a day? But man, you just get the idea going into this that the ball's going to be flying in Ohio Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, that's what these teams have done best, especially the last couple of weeks, as Ohio State's been reeling a little bit with the rushing attack. And it certainly helps if you're Ryan Day to have that complement of wide receivers if you're having some issues on the ground. But at some point, Ohio State will want to address that, need to address that. It's creating some issues in the red zone, obviously, for them, but both teams are more than capable of airing it out and making it look good. And it should be a fun one. I think that more than anything, when you talk about stopping David Bell, obviously Denzel Burke will be key to that, Cameron Brown, but it all starts. Purdue, are they going to be able to protect? Are they going to be allowed to hold Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison and Haskell Garrett and Jack Sawyer and Javonte Jean-Baptiste? Because if they are, well, there might be a lot of points scored. If they're not, I think, that clock speeds up. You don't have to cover Bell as long, and then Purdue might run into some issues. So that to me still starts up front in this matchup for Ohio State.
It's amazing. I thought Ohio State had another good day from its defensive front at Nebraska. Nebraska misses 2 field goals in that game, or it's a much closer game than even it turned out to be. And in other words, you think this defense is ready for an all-out assault, an all-out aerial assault. Obviously, Sean Clifford threw more than 50 passes, so they've already withstood one of those. And he had, in my opinion, as good a receiver as there is in the Big Ten this year in Jahan Dotson. He's right up there with Olave and Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and David Bell, in my opinion, in terms of pure talent. I'm stammering only because, it just seems like the Ohio State defense is headed this way, and the Ohio State offense may not be down here, but the Ohio State offense has lost, like you alluded to before the interview with Keith Byars, has lost its edge somewhere along the way. Something is missing. But number one, do you agree that this defense is probably ready for this test once again?
Well, I don't think that a one-dimensional offense can have that much success against Ohio State, because if it knows what you want to do, and we've seen this before, whether that's the run or the pass, if there's just one thing that an opponent really hangs its hat on, Ohio State has the athletes, the scheme, the coaches, all of it to take that away. They almost always do. Now, we know that there were, some factors that led them to make some changes in September, but if Purdue, what they run for 6 yards against Michigan State,
something like that.
Yeah, and they won the game, and they made a choice. They stuck with it. Michigan State wasn't able to stop it. I don't think in this situation, the way Denzel Burke is playing, the way a healthy Cam Brown is playing, the way Ronnie Hickman is playing, the way Steele Chambers has helped elevate even that pass defense with the way he's rolling at linebacker when he's allowed to be out there. And then this pass rush, I think they'll just say, hey, Purdue, you're not going to come to the horseshoe and win by throwing it 50, 60 times and trying to rely solely on Bell, who's great. And he's going to get catches just the same way that Jahan Dotson did. You're not going to be able to eliminate him entirely, but Ohio State, pretty much neutralized and gave Penn State this. And so you're not going to win with that. And they had success with that. And I think it's even more extreme for Purdue because it doesn't have the same caliber 1 through 11 of talent on the field on offense as Penn State did. We'll see. I mean, that's the part of it that is fun. Is seeing a strength on strength matchup and things how that plays out. But if you don't have the ability to run the ball, and balance out and play 2 different ways and try and keep Ohio State guessing, I don't think you have much of a chance to have success. Now they'll hit some. Nebraska did last week, 2 long touchdowns, but to do it for 4 quarters, I would be skeptical of that.
Well, that's the thing. One big pass play can erase a lot of sins, man. Can erase a lot of strain, and we'll see. I mean, definitely Purdue has the willingness to do that, to try that, to get to that, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, you saw as Matt Barnes took it on himself for a bad call on that one long pass, basically over the middle, that turned into a touchdown to Toure. But man, it sure looked like some safeties made some bad choices on that play. But that is what it is at this point. It's funny though, because it sure looks like defenses are doing the same thing to Ohio State that you're talking about. Ohio State doing to opposing offenses. You're not going to win running the ball. You're going to have to throw it. And boy, the last couple of weeks, especially Penn State and Nebraska had a pretty good plan up front, in my opinion, to shut down the Ohio State run game. You heard Keith Byars talk about it. It's almost like if Travion doesn't get the ball, then it's going to be a pass. You know what I mean? And that's putting it in simple terms. But when everybody's zeroing on one guy and then keeping coming against your passing game, eventually you're going to pay the price one way or the other. What was alarming really to me was how Ohio State finally got something going with this running game on that last true possession of the game, and got into Nebraska territory. And you just knew that Ryan Day was impatient to make something happen now with the pass game, to play off of that. And it almost played right into the hands of Nebraska. They broke through basically forced, I don't know if they forced CJ Stroud. It looked like he was rolling from the get-go, but then strip sack him. Luke Whippler ends up falling on the ball for Ohio State, with Ohio State up only 6 points at that point, right near midfield. And you're kind of going, wow, why did that just happen? Why did you just call that play? And obviously they were looking for a quickie, but that was troubling a little bit. Awesome.
I think there were a number of examples of play calling that weren't Ryan Day's best efforts on Saturday, but I'm not really of the mindset that that's one of them. I think if Thayer Munford and Nicholas Petit-Frere both completely whiffed on blocks, and they had open receivers because Nebraska wasn't expecting them to do that. And part of Ryan Day's reputation, part of his success, is his willingness to be aggressive in situations where most people won't. Now, I don't dispute the fact that time, score, situation probably means you should be working on the clock more, and it may seem like a completely unnecessary risk, and you feel that way. I have no problem with that opinion. I think there's adjustments that needed to be made to the scheme or game plan with the rushing attack that weren't there, and that they were 2 weeks in the making. And you expect more creativity from Ryan Day in that regard, or you expect, maybe you see that Penn State is just shooting in on the backside where there's no blocks or no efforts being made in the inside zone rushing attack, and they're blowing it up, and there's no resistance whatsoever. So I think there are, as you said, you want to take exception with that play call in a key situation or other parts of it. I think there are lots of different avenues that you could take to say this may have not been Ryan Day's best game plan, best play calling, any of that stuff. But, I sort of see where he's coming from on that one. And if Jeremy Rucker catches the 4th and 1 early on, or taking the shot down the field, different conversations maybe. It didn't happen. Overall, Ohio State's got to execute those things better too. And it was several weeks in a row, Tim, where we've had this, where it's like you can kind of spread a lot of blame or question or whatever around. It's just that's been the disjointed part of this. And Ohio State's offense is held to such a high standard, and the coaching staff obviously is, and the quarterback is, that it's notable when they're coming up short when they're not accustomed to doing so.
Yeah. Where I kind of disagree with you is, I understand me, you'd much rather cover an aggressive coach than a guy, biggest, I was fixed to say something's going to get me in trouble there. You'd much rather cover an aggressive coach, just leave it at that. But there comes a moment in a game when you've got a lead, and your offensive line has got their defensive front on its heels. That was obvious to anybody watching that game on that drive, and there was no reason to pull the sword out on that play. And then number 3, it goes back to the old Woody Hayes, 3 things can happen, 2 of them are bad. Well, actually 5 or 6 things can happen to you, and 4 or 5 of them are bad when you throw the ball. And especially in a situation where you don't, because number 1, Nebraska was hell-bent to get upfield to stop the run. So you got to take that into account. Yeah, and it's really funny because I saw PFF did a breakdown on Thayer Munford's day, and it said he only gave up 1 quarterback hurry. Well, that was it. The most critical, could have been the most critical play in Ohio State's season right there. And I just thought that was a moment where you just kind of put the gun back in the holster and you keep running the ball because your running back was feeling it. He was seeing things. The offensive line was feeling it. And sometimes you got to get that feel going, what is my team doing best at this very moment? Because you can put yourself in jeopardy. We saw Ohio State do that against Alabama in 2014 in that victory in the Sugar Bowl. They decided they wanted to get Evan Spencer a touchdown. And they basically have the game in hand, throw the ball, stops the clock. Alabama doesn't have to use one of it, or I think it's last time out. Next thing you know, at the end of the game, Tyvis Powell's interception was in the end zone because Alabama had the ball back and was throwing the ball to maybe get in position to tie the game. So there are moments when you need to just stick to your knitting, and I thought that was a learning moment for Ryan Day and his offensive staff. And I'm going to stand by that regard because I totally love covering Ryan Day and this aggressive offense. Every week you see something new. But when you have pounded on that nail as long as they did in that game, they finally are driving that nail, and then suddenly, you opt to go another direction. I just thought that was it. That was not good timing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it's if they execute the blocking better, there were receivers open. So
well, yeah, but they did. But my point was, yeah, I understand all that, but it was like on a pass play, a lot of things can go wrong. Whereas on a running play, let's say Travion Henderson gets stoned at the line of scrimmage, you've lost 0 yards instead of like knocking yourself at that moment even out of field goal range. They had to battle just to get back into field goal range. I understand all those ifs and buts, but there's sometimes calculated risks you don't need to take. I guess is my point.
Yeah, and I'm not telling you you're wrong. I think that I understand that where the thinking came from, and obviously it wasn't executed well, and it nearly cost them. I think that in the grand scheme of things, if it were me out there, I said I probably would have ran the clock down the same way that you would have. I'm just saying out of all the things that went on offensively, that one didn't strike me as the craziest of them all. Maybe I'm in the minority. It could be. I probably am, but that's knowing the way he operates. He's done a lot of things, a bunch of 4th and 3s and taking deep shots that I would never do personally. If that's the way he runs his program, that's what he wants his offense to do. That's how he's found a lot of success. And, it would have been counter to his culture to just, oh boy, I hope we can run out this clock here. And so that. Yeah,
I know, I got you. But at the end of the third quarter, I don't have a problem with it. When you've got the game almost in hand, right, and you're knocking them back, and it's near the end of the game, and one more first down, and you've won the game. You know what I mean? I guess that's my problem with it. I mean, it's like sometimes you just got to lick your wounds, win by 6 instead of 9. Now I'm talking about time of the game. I'm not talking, because we could go back and parse up a lot of things, that went right and wrong for Ohio State over the last 2 weeks offensively. And but there are moments when, like I said, you got to put the gun back in the holster, and that's my best analogy, even though I hate using the gun cliches and analogies, as you well know. But I see exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, there was stuff there, but you still got to get the pass off. You still relying on 5 guys to give you some protection. And, that's not the time of the game, I don't think, to do that. So that's just my take. Cause my philosophy, when in doubt, air it out. I don't think they were in doubt on that play. I think it was you hand off to Travion, who's finally got some momentum going. They've been waiting all day to get it going, you know what I mean? And they finally had it going, and bingo, bango. Hey, I want to ask you this. Isn't it amazing what Steel Chambers means to that defense when he's in the lineup? I mean, I know I've said that, but it was crazy. There was just a spark there that wasn't there, and I know he got another penalty this week. I forgot what it was for, but at the end of the game, he ends up with his,
defensive holding.
Yeah, and, defensive holding. Did you watch that play?
See a defensive hold. I didn't see his hands on that receiver in any way on the entire play.
Let me ask you this. Did we learn that you can't knock down a running back? You can't run through a running back who may or may not be going out for a screen pass. Is that what we just learned? I mean, what did we learn from that?
Big Ten officials, Tim. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. They're Nebraska fans are upset about the officiating that game too, and maybe they go home and say, "Hey, we did something right," because everybody hates us, but they hate you because they're very, very bad at their jobs. Like, it sounds crazy to be having this conversation every week, or like the holding stuff has got to stop. I know that you can say it can be called on every single play, but it's not just like ticky-tack holds that are happening to Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison. There was one play where Harrison's jersey was fully pulled back 3 feet, and they didn't throw a flag. There's another play that we broke down on the three and out from the fourth quarter with Zach Bourne for Buckeye Q this week, where Zach Harrison, again, the jersey doesn't get pulled out. This time it gets pulled up, and you can see all of his pads and the back flap. Well, jerseys, the way that they're made now, they don't just accidentally fly up.
No.
So I don't know. I don't want this podcast, this show every single week to be breaking down the officiating, but I really just don't understand how it's acceptable.
Well, Yeah, I tweeted about that one where basically I'm saying, who's this mystery guy rushing the quarterback? And then bloom, the left tackle let go of Zach Harrison's jersey, and suddenly it popped around. He was number 9. Yeah. I mean, what are you watching? They're egregious to a certain extent. And then, of course, there's always going to be you've heard this before. If you complain too much, not me and you, but if Ryan Day and his group complain too much, then sometimes it comes back to bite you, but it is numbing to watch this repeatedly week after week and to see what the opposing offensive line is getting away with when it comes to stopping Ohio State's defensive front. And, we sit here and go, why doesn't Zach Harrison or why doesn't Zach Harrison have more sacks, or why doesn't Tyreek have more hurries? Which, by the way, Tyreek Smith, once again, I thought played a hell of a game. Well, one of the reasons is they're getting held on almost every play.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that they need to call every hold on every play. I think it's the egregious ones, like you said, the jersey being nearly ripped off of Zach Harrison.
Yeah,
those, I don't know how they can be ignored, and really, I don't blame Penn State. I don't blame Nebraska, and I won't blame Purdue. If you find out early in the game what you can get away with, and you are a competitor,
right,
then you keep doing it. If
right.
they're not going to call a hold, then there's no incentive not to.
Right. You set the tone. Yeah.
And that, like Sean Clifford was able to rack up 330 yards because he had time that no one else would have. Adrian Martinez was able to make some plays because he had extra time that nobody else, he shouldn't have had.
Yeah.
If you call it once or twice early in the game, well, all right, I can't do that. This is what they're going to call. I'm not allowed to get a fistful of jersey, which should be obvious, but they're not throwing any laundry on the field for it. All right, well, I can push the envelope here. And what are they going to call? Well, it wound up being nothing again for the second consecutive week. And, Purdue will notice that. Look, hey, we got to try this because one-on-one, they don't have a tackle that can block Zach Harrison or Tyreek Smith or Javonte Jean-Baptiste or Jack Sawyer or JT Tuimoloau. They just don't.
Yeah.
That's your only hope.
You know what they could do? I was thinking about this as that game went on. They could have backs for jerseys for the defensive ends and defensive tackles that are actually strap on by Velcro. You know what I mean? On the front and the back. And that way you get a fistful of jersey and all of a sudden you can't hide. You're standing there and you're holding the front or back of Zach Harrison's jersey in your hand while he's continuing to rush. And there hadn't been that's the way they could fix it. Or they could make all these guys wear oven mitts. I don't know. That's another way I've thought of, but you can't do that when you hide in anyway, folks, we're not just, this is, and watch football. For me, for 60 years, for awesome. How old are you? Awesome. 25. What are you? Awesome.
38.
Yeah. Awesome. I just threw that in there. Having watched football for 35 years, we've watched a lot of football, and this holding thing is egregious right now. That's the best way of wording it. Hey, real quick before we go, who's going to win? If Ohio State wins out, and it looks like Ohio State still has a great shot of winning out. 3 games left in the regular season. Next week's game against Michigan State will start at noon, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. So will the game at Michigan the following week. If Ohio State wins out, who will it be playing in the Big Ten championship game? Give me a prediction right here, right now.
It's just Minnesota laid such a bad egg after we talked about this the last 2 weeks and timed up really nicely with PJ Fleck getting that extension. Maybe you should have waited on that one, Minnesota. But I don't know. They still have that opportunity to win the league. It's so bunched up there with, that was a 4-way tie now. What a really just ugly kind of mess. Wisconsin is playing right now the best football on that side of the league, but
yep,
it's so perilous in my opinion with Graham Mertz. I'm going to be hesitant here. We've seen this play out before with a couple of strong performances and then absolutely crashing back to earth. They have the best defense, I believe, on that side. But, now Minnesota gets to look at this and restart, and PJ he'll actually be focused on something and then other than negotiating his contract. I still right now would think that Minnesota has a chance to win it, and they probably will. But based on history and precedent, I guess we're due for another Ohio State, Wisconsin every other year situation in Indy. So I guess that's probably what's going to happen. But I still wouldn't rule Minnesota out.
By the way, is that sine or cosine, or is this cosine and is that sine? You know what I mean? Yes, this is Wisconsin's time, or this is Wisconsin's time to once again step up into the Big Ten championship game, which it has shared with Northwestern the last 4 years, and every other year.
You know what might help, Tim, is that this 6-year arrangement crossover game with Nebraska is now over.
Yeah,
it was the last one, which it did not turn out the way the Big Ten wanted at all, with the traditional historic powers, like, oh, welcome in Nebraska and get them this series. Mostly blowouts and then 2 competitive games in there. And now, but that'll be replaced for Ohio State with Wisconsin. So maybe the fact that we can see this at some other point during the season could save us from having to see this matchup in Indy every other year. Otherwise, boy, we're going to get really sick of seeing the same people in press boxes over the next few years.
Yeah, crazy. Depending on where it's funny. I really think Wisconsin's got it going on now, though, man. I mean, they did have a very slow start, especially offensively, to the season. But their defense is playing very well. I think you agree with me on that. And, I think the last 3 weeks in the West are going to be as interesting, if not more so, than the last 3 weeks in the East. Last thing I wanted to ask you, we talked about the CFP rankings in the first segment of this podcast. But, is Cincinnati – did it come to the edge there, the precipice, and has it stepped back from the precipice, of really making that leap, in your opinion? Or we saw Tulsa play Ohio State. Tulsa had a pretty damn good defense that day. Ohio State still managed to score 41 points in that game. But is the AAC maybe better than people give it credit for, also in terms of teams getting up for each other? Just what's your take on just the Cincinnati situation?
Ryan Day kind of alluded to this, and it may sound like obvious in the Big Ten because the level of competition is better. It's hard to get through it. We know that they're all, 6, 7 top 25 teams in that league, that it's going to be a gauntlet. But, you've seen this in other leagues that you've been around. I certainly have, even dating back to time in the Mountain West. Conference games and conference opponents are just different.
Yes.
For one, you recruit at similar levels. Like the water finds its level there. And Cincinnati, as great of a program as they have built and as successful as Luke Fickell has been, and the way he's elevated to try and have a more national threat, national power, bringing in some other players. Well, they're still not going to have the same opportunity in that league. So you're not going to have a bunch of 4 and 5 stars on that roster. So even if they do, they are still playing against teams that see them every year, that know every game, know the opponents they're playing, what they do, what they don't do, how to scout that, and a lot of pretty successful coaches in that level. Like Luke Fickell's not the only one. So, it's just hard to win conference games, and that's not an excuse for Cincinnati. And in fact, I'm going to actually use it against them right now, in that it's a reminder that they are not a Power 5 school. And to get up to play Georgia once, it definitely counted. It's definitely impressive. To get up to play Notre Dame, yeah, absolutely. I'm not meaning to I know how hard it is, what they've done, what they've accomplished, but it's still different than doing it every single week. The way, when Alabama struggles against LSU, and I took a shot at that early on in this show, but LSU is loaded with 4 and 5 star players, even if they've got a bunch of guys hurt. The next ones in are 4 and 5 stars. That's not the case for the opponents that Cincinnati is playing. And it's hard. That's why they also deserve credit when they do go undefeated, or if they go undefeated.
It's hard.
But it's different, to still say, all right, well, the next 2 games, you're going to have to do it against Georgia and Ohio State consecutively. I don't think they could do that. Yeah.
I agree with you 100% on everything you just said. So now I don't have to go off on a diatribe. And you're exactly right. And it's not putting down what they've done at all, but they're not comparable when you really get right down to it. But I want to tell you something. College Football Playoff Committee putting Alabama number 2 in that first rankings, that's that's based on what Alabama's done over the years, not what Alabama has done this year, in my opinion. And we saw that, an example of that again against LSU. Maybe the LSU team is finally getting its act together and trying to win, trying to play well for Coach O on his way out. Who knows what the inspiration there was, but those were two programs pretty much going in opposite directions, and like you just pointed out, that was a conference game against fairly like competitors. I'm talking about the players involved, and you saw how close things can be in college football. This is not one of the great Alabama teams. I will stand on that. Right. And I'll be honest with you, right at this very moment, this sounds far-fetched, but I think Texas A&M plays Georgia for the SEC championship in 4 weeks. And I'm sure I can be wrong. I just think Alabama, Auburn's going to be an interesting game. Let's just put it that way. Despite what happened in College Station the other night with Auburn. Right. I just think it's going to be very interesting. But I didn't make that a prediction. I just kind of threw it out there, and I wouldn't be surprised.
I like it.
I didn't do a Spencer Holbrook on that one. Hey, by the way, Steel Chambers finally got his interception 3 weeks after I called for him to get the one, but he didn't take it back for a pick six. So there you go. But man, those bold predictions are getting to me a little bit. Those, as I call them, outrageous obfuscations. But anyway, hey, awesome. Thanks for joining me again, my man. Let me ask you one last thing. We'll get out of here, and just give me sort of a yes or no with one sentence rejoinder, perhaps. Does Ohio State finish the regular season 11-1?
Yes.
And that means you have faith on the next 3 weeks, but especially the trip to the team up north.
I mean, honestly, Tim, I think that game is the easiest of the three. I do not. Everybody will say, yeah, it's important. You take it seriously. Michigan's always tough no matter what. It's a rivalry. That's fine. Yeah. I'm not here to argue against that. But Michigan State is a much more complete team than Michigan in my estimation, especially because they can both run and throw the football.
Yep.
I think next week in the Horseshoe is the most challenging game. What Purdue does extremely well with Bell and with that passing attack is obviously going to put some stress on the coaching staff this week and on Saturday at 3:30. Teams that do something really well and are have nothing to lose, that's hard. There will be no problem in the big house with motivation. There will be no question about the physicality that you have to play with. But Ryan Day knows how to scheme up and will not be short of aggressiveness against Michigan in that game. And they are so limited offensively. There was all the conversation, they figured it out and they're running really well and Jim Harbaugh's got that toughness. You can stop Michigan's rushing attack. Their offensive line is not good. The personnel at running back, like Haskins, is fine, but they can't throw. And that's been their problem for a long time. I don't see it. You said one sentence, but I think if you put those 3 games in order, Michigan State is the toughest one remaining. And it's not even that close. Purdue just provides a challenge that's unique and you have to be ready for. And then Michigan, I just think, is wildly overrated and probably going to lose this week.
Yeah. I said one sentence, but, you can put the period anywhere you want to put it. You know what I'm saying? And number 2, I'll just leave it at this. Well, who knows? It may come back to bite me, but it's almost like they have a holiday every time Michigan hits a big pass play, It's like they just invented passing also. Yeah, I'm talking about with this year's team. And that's okay. But, the big games are won or lost by who's got, in my opinion, you got to run the ball, but you got to be able to throw it and throw it with consistency. That will continue to set Ohio State apart in the Big Ten, especially down the stretch. If Purdue wants to make it a throwing game, I think that's if they want to go pass for pass with Ohio State, I think that's a big mistake on Saturday. I think Ohio State is primed from what I've seen of Purdue's defense. I think Ohio State is primed to get after it on Saturday, throwing the ball. Yeah, they want to run it too. And I think Ohio State can have some success running it. But like I said, you don't want to get into a passing deal with Ohio State, Ryan Day, and C.J. Stroud. Would I like to see C.J. Stroud run the ball about 5 or 7 times a game? Absolutely. That would change everything, in my opinion, for this offense, especially for the running game. We'll see if they get to that. What's just your quick one sentence take on that?
I mean, he ran it a couple of times on Saturday.
Yeah, kept on a zone read option. It was unbelievable. Go ahead.
When Ryan Day is giving him the option or relying on him to do it, CJ Stroud does it. And I don't think that you'll see it happen a lot more than that, because so much of the philosophy for Ryan Day is to make sure that his quarterbacks are protected and winning the game with their arm.
Yep.
If he wanted CJ Stroud to run a lot more, it'd be very clear. Now, there are certainly opportunities when he's scrambling, extending plays, where the decision-making could be different or improved, and it may lend itself to a couple of those scrambles. But I don't see Ohio State's issue in the run game being tied to CJ Stroud not running. I think it caused turnovers on Saturday. I don't think it had anything to do with the what I viewed as schematic and potentially play calling issues of running the football. I don't think CJ Stroud solves that, and I don't think Ryan Day wants to address it that way, or else he already would have.
Yeah. They got to pick up, like you just said, though, they got to pick up those backside guys just coming off the ball. And, because that caught them 3 times the other day. And that's with Travion Henderson in the game. I mean, they got to do something about that. I'm sure they're watching that video. They watched that video since that game and went, God, are you kidding me? About 8 times in the run game, because there were things there at the point of attack if they had gotten to the line of scrimmage, and they didn't get, you gotta, when you've got a guy pulling and stuff, you've got to, there are all these little nuances, changes you've got to make now late in the year when everybody's kind of caught on to what you're trying to get done up front on some of those run plays. And I'm sure you and on my favorite thing, Buckeye Q with Zach Boren, I'm sure you guys probably saw something about that or talked about that. You definitely talked about the holding calls, it sounds like, but that's my favorite thing on our website right now. No offense. Hey, after the Tim May podcast,
you gotta trust the personnel around you to do what they do.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up another Tim May podcast. I'll just get to the end here instead of like mamby-pamby. And Awesome Ward, thanks for joining me again, my man. And I'll let you land this one, and you did a very good job. Now I'll taxi it to the gate. The pilot always takes over when the plane's on the ground. I don't know if you know that or not. But until next week, for Awesome Ward, this is Tim May. We'll see you then.